Today we are going to continue our King of My Heart series. But before that, have any of you ever played the game King of the Hill? Or know what it is? I don't know why this scene reminds me. I only played this game once, but it somehow created this core memory inside of me. It just has never left. Me and my friends, right after high school, we went to this park and we played King of the Hill on top of a picnic bench. Not the best place to play the game. No. I don't remember any of us getting really, really hurt. But I just remember this was a very pivotal moment because we were all going through a really difficult season. We were trying to figure out the next stage in life, but we all had this high competitive energy, and we all wanted to be the best. There's no second place. There's no third place. There's no participation awards inside of King of the Hill. There's just one king. And it kind of creates this kind of a Highlander ideology. If you've ever seen the movie Highlander, you know the iconic phrases, there can only be one. And, there's this big battle, and, there's only one immortal person at the end of the movie. And there's multiple movies, but it's all pointing to the idea that there can only be one king. There can only be one victor. When it comes to competition, there can only be one true winner, and you're trying to determine who is the best. For the past month, I've been kind of watching this feud that's been happening between these two different hip-hop artists. I don't know if you've kept up with this, between Drake and Kendrick Lamar. Are either of you familiar with either of those groups? I mean, it doesn't matter what they are singing in this moment. I think what's really interesting, because the news is buzzing all about this. For each day of the week, they were all coming out with different tracks to fight against each other. Everything was on the table. They were calling out each other's successes and failures. They were coming up with different disses. They were coming up with different... they were using their families against each other, essentially. It was just a really ugly feud. And it's still going. But the ideology that was put inside of that was that there can only be one best. And they had to put down the other person who was trying to take first place. There can only be one king in that kind of fight. And it was an ugly thing. When you're trying to defend the throne, when someone tries to take the position of best, the threat of losing your position invokes violence. When you feel like what you have at stake is going to disappear. And it could be something as silly as a battle between, who's the best hip-hop artist, or it could be something more extreme, like you look at the example of Saul and David. Saul thought he was going to lose everything. He was going to lose his kingdom. He was going to lose his family. He was going to lose his prestige. He was going to lose his pride. You could pick anything that you think that is yours exclusively, and if you feel like it's going to disappear, what are you going to do? You either fight, or you run away and try to keep it to yourself. I still remember this, thinking back to this group of friends I had when we were playing these King of the Hill games. We played all sorts of games, but one of the most memorable times, we would all gather together on the couch, and we would all play this Super Smash Brothers game, a little fighting game. You'd get 3 lives, and if you got knocked out of the screen, then you were done. And I thought I was the best. Or my friends might say, you're maybe second best, maybe third, I don't know. They would argue, but I won a lot of the games. And I met this friend in college, and he joined my friend group, and he did something called the mythical 3-0. Wiped everybody out. There was no competition. He smoked everybody. And I just thought to myself, why should I keep playing anymore? I don't stand a chance. Even in my friend group now, I can't even stand a chance anymore. And it just created this resentment inside of me. Because something that I was so prideful about was gone. And when you get to this moment, I saw a lot of you post this picture this week. It was very apropos for this sermon. When we feel like something is lost, there's this inward part of ourselves where we get stuck looking at ourselves. The clever trap of self comes when we spend too long looking at ourselves, though. When we can't see anything else, we freeze up, never grow up, and lose our way. The quote that went along with this picture says, Satan disguises submission to himself under the ruse of personal autonomy. He never asks us to become his servants. Never once did the serpent say to Eve, I want to be your master. The shift in commitment is never from Christ to evil. It is always from Christ to self. And instead of his will, self-interest now rules, and what I want reigns. And that is the essence of sin. We're going to see a lot of this today inside of 1 Samuel 19. As we're looking at the premise of 1 Samuel, you'll see that there is a competition, there is a battle, there is a war going on for your heart, for all of the hearts that are present. All throughout history, whoever takes first place is always at stake. So the big idea is that you must choose to have God be king of your heart. And I titled this sermon, The Highlander Principle. When you think of the Highlander ideology or the Highlander movie, there's always this idea that somebody has to be first, and there's a competition, and there can only be one person. This has been reinvented in customer service engagement as well as data science, called the Highlander Principle, where everybody is uniting under one premise. Everybody is uniting under one common cause for the sake of success. And you'll see there's generally two different kinds of ideologies that pop up inside of 1 Samuel 19. There is the ideology of, am I going to be the best? And am I going to stay the best? Or is God going to have the best for me? Saul follows the principle that I have to keep doing it all by myself. I struggle through this and try to maintain my position. And David, he follows the pattern of God has the best for me, even if I don't know what's going to happen next. So the big idea is whatever takes our attention will determine our affection. To give you a bit of context, up to this point, Israel is in roughly about 1025 BC at this point. They're in a time of kings. They've moved from judges, which would represent God in a powerful and supernatural way, towards a kingdom. At first, a kingdom like all the other nations, where Saul was equipped with all the right stuff. He was equipped in the right way. He was the people's choice. He looked great. But he also went his own way. He rejected God. And God rejected him. And now David, God's choice, the man after God's own heart, he is the incoming king, yet he is not trying to steal the throne. He is submitting to the king, and he is waiting upon the Lord. David has a string of military successes as he trusts the Lord, and his successes are not received well by the king. Even if they're received well by everyone else, everybody in David's proximity loves him. But Saul allows jealousy to rule his heart. And it festers to the point where he moves from just a private attack, blaming it first perhaps on his mental illness at the time, throwing spears at David in multiple occasions, and moving towards using his daughters as bait in order to go to more and more wars. All of this starts with Saul letting jealousy and envy rule his heart. And today we'll see that he moves from a private and indirect fashion of trying to kill David to a more direct fashion, threatening David's life. 1 Samuel 19:1 starts. Saul now urged his servants and his son Jonathan to assassinate David. But Jonathan, because of his strong affection for David, told him what his father was planning. Tomorrow morning, he warned him, you must find a hiding place out in the fields. I'll ask my father to go out there with me, and I'll talk to him about you. Then I will tell you everything I can find out. Saul's not hiding his motives anymore. Saul is moving to a space where he is openly ready to attack and involve multiple people in David's death. He can't blame it on mental illness anymore. He can't blame it on circumstance anymore. He is actively seeking David's death. And Jonathan, he's kind of in a stuck state. He's in this dual loyalty between, do I stay loyal to my father? Do I honor my father in this circumstance? Do I avoid being treasonous because David is labeled an enemy? Or do I stay affectionate towards David? I have developed this bond. I've given a covenant to David. I have sacrificed my power, my position, my prestige to David, saying, you matter more than all this, and I'm submitting to you. He's kind of stuck in between a rock and a hard place, but he's willing to give that kind of supernatural love. That doesn't come easy. When he knows that there's a stake at place. Confronting sin when stakes are high looks like this. He takes his father out to the field the next morning. The next morning it says, Jonathan spoke with his father about David, saying many good things about him. The king must not sin against his servant David. Jonathan said, he's never done anything to harm you. He's always helped you in any way he could. Have you forgotten about the time he risked his life to kill the Philistine giant and how the Lord brought a great victory to all Israel as a result? You were certainly happy about it then. Why should you murder an innocent man like David? There is no reason for it at all. Let me ask you, with a statement first. One of the greatest kinds of love anyone can give you is when they are willing to challenge and confront you. And it's hard to see that in the moment because it feels like they're attacking you. Like, you could think of parents who have teenagers and wanting to go their own way and do their own thing, and they're like, I just want to jump off this bridge. It's going to be fine. I just want to go super fast. I just got my license, and, I'm fine. I'm invincible. And you confront them. And they give you the classic, like, I hate you. You don't like me. You don't even love me. You don't let me do anything. Come on. I was that kid. The love that you experience from confrontation and rebuke is hard to see. But a loving rebuke and a loving correction steers you in the right direction. And this is coming from a son. This is coming essentially from a subject where if he is supporting his enemy, Saul's enemy is declared David, and Jonathan is supporting him. This could be considered treason, where Jonathan could die in the next moment. He could be executed in this moment. And then he stands up and he confronts his father and tries to show how, it's not just his father's wrong. He's not saying, Father, you're dumb. You don't have your head on right. He's saying, do you remember all of these things? Do you remember that David is supporting you? Do you remember, have you forgotten all the victories that he has brought you before the Lord? You were happy about it then, yet you were turning towards a malicious sense. Like if you remember back from 1 Samuel 11, Saul was passive then. He was on fire for the Lord, and he was willing to spare even the people who were spitting hatred against him. And he said, this is a victory to the Lord. He was willing to spare his detractors, but now he is aiming his wrath at his benefactor. This calls for reminders. And it's interesting because Saul listens to it at first. Saul listened to Jonathan and he vowed, as surely as the Lord lives, David will not be killed. Listen to that though, because he doesn't say, I won't kill David. He may have accidentally, prophetically said, David's not going to die by my hands. He was never killed by anyone, even up to the end of his life. No man killed him. But in the moment, Saul is quick to make an oath. And he follows it for a season. And afterwards, Jonathan called David and told him what happened. And he brought David to Saul. And David served in the court as before. It's like everything's, gravy again. Everything's great. We all went back to normal. And it kind of feels like the sort of forgive and forget kind of mentality. But I think it doesn't quite look like that. I don't think David forgot what happened. I think David reconciled with Saul. And the relationship was patched for a time. But there's still natural consequences that come with the loss of trust and the difficult situations that David was put through. The relationship needed to be repaired, and we don't know how much time passed between verse 7 and verse 8. It could have been a day, a month, a year, multiple years. David was in a sense of normalcy for a time. He got through this battle, he got through this hardship, and everything was fine for a time. I think this is the key verse, though, right here. Verse 8, if you have phone, Bible, if you're willing to mark this line right here. War broke out again after that. Where it says, war came again. And it sounds like, kind of like a menial kind of verse. It's easy to skip over that. But here's the thing. When you struggle with anything, you think of your life circumstance. You get through it once. Are you done with that struggle? Does everything become easy again? You might be okay for a time. A day, a week, a month, a year. But something evolves, something changes. Again, if we remember the verse that we first started with, we have a roaring lion of an enemy that is out to seek our destruction. And looking for ways to twist and turn things and make things worse. We have a world around us that is filled with all kinds of negativity and all kinds of things that push us in all kinds of directions, ripping us in all different kinds of ways, creating anxiety and stress and fear and depression. War never changes in the physical sense, in the emotional sense, in the relational sense, in the political sense, any kind of fashion of life. It never changes. It keeps coming back. And this is what happens. War broke out again. And on one front, David led his troops against the Philistines. He attacked them, and with such fury they all ran away. Things were great in the physical sense, but when he returns home, in verse 9 it says, but one day when Saul was sitting at home with a spear in hand, if you're comfortable in a time of peace, do you hold a weapon? If you invite friends over, do you carry a gun? I mean, I wouldn't want to be in that house if you have a gun all loaded up and, you're just having a chat about, I don't know, the Packers. That doesn't make sense. It's like, I'll watch it at home. But, here Saul is. He's got a spear in hand. I'm sure he's got his hand right here. And David has gotten into the rhythm of taking care of Saul again with this tormenting spirit from the Lord. It suddenly comes upon him again, and David, as he played his harp, Saul hurled the spear at David. And David dodged out of the way, leaving the spear stuck in the wall, and he fled and escaped that night. I think David reconciled with Saul, but he didn't reconcile with the spear. He remembered the pain and the hurt that came with that. He remembered that his life was at stake, and even still, he came and tried to take care of Saul. He came and still tried to love Saul, even through this difficult situation. I think he did forgive Saul, but he acknowledged the natural consequences of broken trust. It's admirable, again, that David did not retaliate here either, because honestly, if you had a spear thrown at you, would you throw it back? David didn't. David did not try to seek the throne here. He did not try to usurp Saul. He remained keeping his affection and his attention fixed on where the Lord was leading him. And he got right out of there. Verse 11. Then Saul sent troops. Some translations will say messengers. It's equivalent to like a hitman. To watch David in his house. They were told to kill David when he came out the next morning. They were guarding a house so that nothing would come out. Pretty wild, pretty deceptive. But Michal, David's wife, warned him. I'm sure she looked out the window and was like, yeah, I know that guy, I know that guy, and I know that guy, and they don't like you, David. So she says, if you don't escape tonight, you're going to be dead by the morning. So she helped him climb out through a window, and he fled and escaped. And she took an idol That should raise a warning flag there. And put it in his bed, covered it with blankets, and put a cushion of goat's hair on its head. Classic. When the troops came to arrest David, she told them he was sick in bed and couldn't get out of bed. Now, there's a couple questions here, because, you see Saul's deception. This art of deception is high class. You got guards around the house, and it might look like, oh, yeah, we're just protecting my daughter, we're protecting my son-in-law, everything's fine. We're just trying to take care of any potential threats when they themselves are the threats. And you got Michal, who creates this deceptive plan to, make it look like David's in bed and all sick and stuff. But what does she use? She uses a household idol. Why? Where did that come from? This idol is called a teraphim in Hebrew, which is typically used for the worship of something in creation and used for magical ritual healings. Why is that in her house? I think Saul has lost faith in the Lord, and he's trying to find other solutions. And this has trickled down to his kids. And they're trying to find something to give them answers and hope and direction. And this is turning their attention and their affection towards something that doesn't work. But you see, again, David is not a participant in this deception process. He is co-conspirator in a passive sense. He is trying to preserve his life. The author is careful to note in both of David's deliverances and even in the chapter before, against all of Saul's threats, he is trying to show that he's not trying to usurp the throne. He is seeking to honor the king and honor the Lord. I'm sorry. I missed a slide. Verse 15. Saul sent the troops back to get David. He ordered, bring him to me in his bed so I can kill him. But when they came to carry David out, they discovered that it was only an idol in the bed with a cushion of goat's hair on its head. That's like a Dr. Seuss rhyme there. Why have you betrayed me like this and let my enemy escape? Saul demanded of Michal. I had to, Michal replied. He threatened to kill me if I didn't help him. Did you see that earlier in the text? Didn't that happen? David didn't try to hurt her. Michal was trying to help him. What's happening here? First, you see Saul, he's not hiding his motives even more. Now he's trying to address that it doesn't matter if David is healthy or sick. All he wants is a dead David. He doesn't care about the state of David. He just wants a dead David. Saul thinks that his daughter should have had her highest priority fixed on her father when she was already given in marriage to David. They were starting a new life. And the deception of the father and the daughter compound into an ugly mess where Michal is in trouble. She's stuck trying to get out of trouble with her father, but also protect David. Again, she's in that in between a rock and a hard place situation. What would you do in this situation? What would you do if you were stuck and you couldn't go anywhere other than somewhere difficult? I mean, it's really easy to think I'll be just like Jonathan. I'll just step up and say, Dad, you're wrong. You should have got this right. David is he's trying to help you. When you're stuck in the struggle, when you're stuck in a state that is difficult, if you're not equipped with the right stuff, you turn to things that will hurt you. This might seem like a white lie in this situation, or something that will help in this situation where Michal lies and says, he threatened to kill me if I didn't help him, because she's getting out of trouble. But she's also shifting blame to David. And the lie compounds in a way where now Saul is justified to chase after David. He has an excuse, even before his servants, to say, see, David's a bad guy. He tried to kill my daughter. Let's go get him. So here's what happens. David escapes and he goes to Ramah to see Samuel. He finds a spiritual mentor during this time, the one who originally anoints him, and he goes to him saying, This is what happens. He told him all that Saul had done to him. And then Samuel took David with him to live at Naioth, which is probably a compound right outside of Ramah where a bunch of prophets and priests would live. This would be a safe spot for him to recover. But when report reached Saul that David was at Naioth in Ramah, he sent troops to capture him. But when they arrived, they saw Samuel leading a group of prophets who were prophesying. The Spirit of God came upon Saul's men, and they all began to prophesy. I mean, that's a good way to stop some people who are trying to kill you. Join in the prayer meeting. Let's all worship God together. And they all got along for a time. They went back home. And Saul says, "Oh, did you kill David?" "No." "What happened? Was he, did he outwit you? Did he escape?" "No." They all joined in the prayer meeting for a time. They all joined in this prophesying during this time. And Saul says, "Fine, I'll get more efficient men. I'll get more efficient hitmen during this time. I'll get people who are better than you." And he sends another set of troops, and they also prophesied too. And the same thing happened a third time. Finally, Saul went himself to Ramah and arrived at the great well of Seku, saying, "Where are Samuel and David?" he demanded. I think this quote is apropos. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. You might think one time is fine. It's a slip up. These guys just didn't get it right. But it happened 3 times. You would think failure should be the point. Something's not working here. Something needs to change. And what Saul does, he says, "Fine, you guys don't want to get this figured out? I'll do it." Leaves in his kingly robes, and he travels himself all the way to Ramah. It's about 3 miles out, and he ends up at the well. And I would presume that this is the well if you think back to 1 Samuel 9, when he has no idea where the prophet Samuel is. And he asks a bunch of women, "Where does the seer live?" This might be close to the same scene, from start to end, where the Spirit of the Lord engages with him. And it seems like he's kind of lost at this point. He says, where's Samuel and David? Where'd they go? He's had the reports already, and the people tell him the same thing. They're at Naioth and Ramah. But on the way to Naioth in Ramah, the Spirit of the Lord came even upon Saul, and he too began to prophesy all the way to Naioth. He tore off his clothes and lay naked on the ground all day and all night, prophesying in the presence of Samuel. The people who were watching exclaimed, "What? Is even Saul a prophet?" This is definitely a humiliation experience. There's nothing glorious about this scene. Saul goes his own way. His struggle consumes him. He allows this obsession with trying to see David eradicated consume him. Instead of becoming victorious, instead he's humiliated before the people, and he's humiliated before Samuel. He's humiliated before the Lord to make the point that this is not the right way. His trust is placed in himself, and it's come back to bite him. This is the last time the Spirit of the Lord rushes upon him. The first time that people coin this phrase is Saul even among the prophets. And they question, he's moved from just this, pretty boy, this handsome boy as he's described in the Bible, somebody who's famous for looking really good in all the land of Israel. And he's become the spiritual guy back in 1 Samuel 9. He's become somebody who's on fire. And he's able and he's equipped to go out to war and lead the people well. And now he's destitute and looks like a fool. It's not a pretty scene. It's not a good ending for Saul, because after this, Saul continues to chase after David to the very end of his life. He does not stop. He does not realize how he's continuing to go down this hole. And we hear a lot about Saul during this time. We hear a lot about what Saul's motives and intentions are, but we don't hear much about what David is going through. And I think it's really interesting when you look at Psalm 59, this is the scene inside of the house when all of the hitmen are around the house. This is what David is going through during his escape. I want you to hear David's heart during this time. He says, "Deliver me from my enemies, O God. Be my fortress against those who are attacking me. Deliver me from evildoers and save me from those who are after my blood. See how they lie in wait for me. Fierce men conspire against me, for no offense or sin of mine, Lord. I have done no wrong, yet they are ready to attack me. Arise to help me. Look at my plight. You, Lord God Almighty, you who are the God of Israel, rouse yourself to punish all the nations. Show no mercy to the wicked traitors. They return at evening, snarling like dogs, and prowl about the city. See what they spew from their mouths. The words from their lips are as sharp as swords. And they think, who can hear us? But you laugh at them, Lord. You scoff at all the nations. You are my strength. I watch for you. You, God, are my fortress, my God on whom I can rely. God will go before me and will let me gloat over those who slander me. But do not kill them, Lord, our shield, or my people will forget. In your might, uproot them and bring them down for the sin of their mouths. For the words of their lips, let them be caught in their pride, for the curses and lies they utter. Consume them in your wrath, consume them till they are no more. Then it will be known to the ends of the earth that God rules over Jacob. They return at evening, snarling like dogs, and prowl about the city. They wander about for food, and howl if not satisfied. But I will sing of your strength. In the morning I will sing of your love. For you are my fortress, my refuge in times of trouble. You are my strength. I sing praise to you. You, God, are my fortress, my God on whom I rely. I mean, what you see here in these verses, in this psalm, is rich with emotion and feeling and difficulty and struggle. David wasn't like, oh man, Saul's after me again. All right, well, I'll just pack up my stuff and get out of here. I mean, it moves really fast from scene to scene. It seems like David's like, man, I'm a master strategist. I'll just get out of here. I'm a master warrior. I'll get out of here. The struggle is real. The struggle is raw. When you look at it through all the Psalms, you see David with his struggles. We could see it for ourselves. A lot of the narrative talks about, Saul's mind back in 1 Samuel 19. We don't, again, see what David's going through. That's my struggle. We see all kinds of struggles, again, that we go through as well. The things that we go through, I think, often feel like what David's going through. They're not things that we just quickly pass over or quickly get over. We try to hide it, or we try to get over it. We try to pretend like it's not there, or if we beat it once, it feels fine for a time. We try to get stronger, or we try to pretend like it won't come back, but it does. And again, if we're not equipped in the right way, things kind of fall apart. So here's the thing, friends. If you are going through a lot, I want to remind you that you're not alone. Jesus is with you and loves you. If you have never accepted Jesus into your life, I urge you to pray this prayer with me today, because what Jesus offers each one of us is his very presence. When you look at David in his life, what continued to guide him was the Spirit of the Lord that was living in him, that was washed over him constantly. What is offered to each one of us is the very presence of God when we place our trust in him. Not only are we forgiven, but we were given a new kind of life and a new kind of purpose and a new kind of direction and a whole new kind of power. To live in a whole different kind of way, so that even when we face these struggles or these battles, we are equipped in a way where we are able to face what comes next. So if you've never accepted Jesus into your life, I encourage you to pray this prayer with me. Father, I give you my life. I can't do this alone. I've tried and loved many things, but nothing is enough. Help me to see you. Jesus, your life models perfection. Your death pays for my sins. Your grave leaves my punishment there. Your resurrection means victory over sin and death. Your forever kingdom leads me, or gives me life and invites me into true living. Help me to know that today. In Jesus' name, amen. This time, Ignite can come up, as well as the ushers for communion. The big idea today is whatever takes our attention will earn our affection. The bottom line is that our struggles, they will come our way whether we expect them to or not. We may win one battle, but the war does not change. If you're not ready and equipped like Saul wasn't, your affections will turn to negative directions. You'll fill your heart and your life with all kinds of a mess. If you place your faith in God, He will lead you and guide you. He will be your fortress and your strong defense. When you feel down and out, you'll know that God is with you and will provide that perfect peace. And again, it's hard to see. I don't deny that even when you read this or when you hear this, that everything will suddenly become easy. It's hard. Life is hard. That's why we need those constant reminders that God's very presence is with us even through the good times and the bad times alike. So I encourage you to continue memorizing Psalm 23. Particularly this week, look at verses 4 and 5. These verses remind us that God is with us every step of the way. So before we start and pass out communion, I'd love to have you join in saying Psalm 23 with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Friends, this is the assurance that we have.